What is history? Basically, history is a study of the written records from the past. Now, as opposed to non-written. Non-written records are archaeology, anthropology, paleontology. Paleontology, a study of weather. You might even include geology, a study of rocks, rock formations, mineral formations. Anthropology, a study of the movements of mankind using archaeology and other types of records. Archaeology is where you dig for artifacts, but history is written records. You have two types of sources. Your primary source is for people who actually saw the event, got out your quill or whatever and wrote it down. Secondary source, people who come along later and try to make sense of the primary source and write a history from taking from primary sources. Your book is mostly a secondary source, but your authors include a whole lot of primary material, also translated, of course. Let's face it, none of the primary sources we're going to use are written in English, at least not the English that you would understand. If you try to read English, it was written in the 1100s, you can't read it. And if you suppose, well, no, there are persons who try to speak it, and if you heard somebody speak 1100 English, you would not understand it without training. The language has changed that much. But anyway, primary source, written by persons who saw the event. Secondary source, written by persons who came much later, maybe hundreds of years later. So if anyone were today writing about George Washington, he might use primary source material. In fact, he should. Letters written by George Washington, letters written to George Washington, and material written about George Washington while he was alive, and then material written about George Washington many, many years after he died. And yeah, that would be but his work would still be a secondary source. All right. Now, folks, before we start, there's a few things I want to make clear. Be prepared for a ride. It's been said that a college teacher's first duty is to pry open closed, complacent minds. I hope to do that. If you've been taught to believe one way, maybe I'll be able to show you that there is another viewpoint. Also, now I had a squabble with a student a year ago, last fall. I want to tell you up front, I do not guarantee that you won't hear something that's offensive. The Constitution may give me freedom of speech, but it does not protect you from offensive speech. I heard a preacher say one time, he said, if I don't step on somebody's toes, I have not done a good job. Hey, I get my toes stepped on once in a while, maybe I need to. Let me give you an example. If you believe that the government should help you get out of poverty every time you find yourself in it, you might find me offensive. Every one of you are going to find yourself at some point in your life, if you haven't already, you will, to where your financial obligations here and your income is here. It happens to everybody. Even Donald Trump, 30 years ago, his net worth was zero. He owed as much money as he had. He had millions and millions in assets, but he owed millions and millions. His net worth went to zero at the time. It happens to everybody. The solution, bail yourself out. All right. Hopefully we'll get that off our chest. Also, well, be prepared to hear opinions that you've probably never heard before. Be prepared for a ride. I plan to give you one before the class is over. Let me say this, that doesn't happen very often. Now, I want to state, I mean all of you know are concerned about your grade. 2/3 of the pupils who finish my course wind up with A's and B's. I don't think I'm that hard. But you do have to work. Don't tell me that you need to get an A in this course to keep your Hope Scholarship. you do need to get an A, earn it. Now about the Hope Scholarship, my oldest daughter had one and lost it temporarily for the very best of reasons. I don't even want to go into why, but for the very best of reasons, believe me. But she got it back again. Don't give me a sob story that I have to have a certain grade. Earn it. If 2/3 of your classmates can make A's and B's, and you can't, might be something problem with you and not with me. All right, having gotten that out of the way, I'll start. Man's beginnings, that's where we're starting from. Historians call the very oldest time period the Paleolithic. This term means the Old Stone Age. Now we go from Old Stone Age to Mesolithic. I won't write that down. Oh, by the way, okay, while I'm thinking about it, I do not give study guides anymore. That encourages students to not buy the book. I want you to buy the book. I want you to read. But if you want a study guide, this right here is the nearest thing you'll see to a study guide. You will find, once you've taken one of my tests, that most of the test questions come from what I write on the board. World History, first semester, Cunningham, welcome aboard. All right. And well, also, I mean, I'm interrupting myself, but while I'm on the topic, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Georgia Perimeter used to meet 30 times a semester. We became Georgia State and we only meet 29 times a semester. Count the classes, including from 29. What this means, folk, is that with my final exam, I include the last two chapters. Chapters 12 and 13 make up half the final. Now, if the last two semesters taught, one student has been caught with that thing. Oh, they both had A's going to the final exam, did not study those last two chapters, went into the final exam, and oh my, failed it, or came close to failing, dropped a grade. One of them dropped his grade to well, they both dropped a grade from an A to a B, thanks to a low score in the final exam. I would suggest you plan to show up for class the days I'm teaching. The final exam counts a fourth grade. Today I'm teaching chapters 12 and 13, which will be late November and early December. You might plan to show up those days. The other tests count fourth year grade, and your paper. There will be a paper that counts a fourth year grade. I'm going to have more to say about the paper when I go over the syllabus next class. The paper will be turned in on turnitin.com, by the way, and you all need to get familiar with Turnitin. It's something that a lot of teachers are using more and more. I've been using it for years. All right, Paleolithic gave way to the Neolithic. Well, actually gave way to the Mesolithic first and Neolithic. Paleolithic means Old Stone Age. Neolithic, New Stone Age. Now, here's the idea behind the Stone Ages, folk. The belief that man started out very primitive. In fact, man didn't even start out as a man. The standard view of how man's origins anymore, the standard view of academia, is that man started out from monkey-like, ape-like ancestors and worked his way up. I want to tell you up front, I believe this to be totally, thoroughly impossible. I do have a little thing on my college about evolution. All right, I discussed this in this morning's class, and one young lady asked me, well, what about mutations? What do you call it when a gene moves from one chromosome to another, folk? And I'll give you a hint, I don't know. A mutation is where a gene changes, but still stays on the same place, on the same chromosome. In order for evolution to occur, at least the Darwin type, genes have to be able to move from one chromosome to another, or move from to different places on the same chromosome. I'll tell you why that's impossible. Suppose a gene did move from chromosome 1 to chromosome 16. unless that creature that produced a member of the opposite sex that had the same mutation, if you call it that, it's not a mutation by my spirit. If unless that, then the line would come to an end right there. You'll make a point fairly clear. I mean, okay, you have a gene located on a chromosome, maybe it's here, and then all of a sudden this gene moves to another chromosome down here. Unless it met a member of the opposite sex that had the same gene moving in the same place, the line comes to an end. The only way that apes could have produced humans was a pair of apes one day produced a human, and somewhere close by another pair of apes produced another human that had all the genetic material located in the same place. If they didn't, they could not have reproduced. So yeah, the other one had to be the opposite sex. I've been accused of teaching theology, but actually my intent is to teach pure science. I'll tell you something else about evolution too. There's big holes in it, big gaps. You might say, what's the gap? The gap between a dog and a wolf is small. The gap between a coyote and a fox is rather small. But the gap between a hummingbird and the other birds is more huge than you realize. That hummingbird flaps its wings 600 times a minute. Any other bird tried that, their feathers would fly off. Not only that, but their blood vessels would burst all to pieces. Their bones would crack. Well, and also, there's a gap between the giraffe and the other animals with short necks. The giraffe is the only animal we know of that when his head is high in the air and he's eating leaves, the blood pressure on his brain is the same as when he gets down and kneels down to drink water from the pond. He has a device that controls the blood pressure on his brain. We humans don't. When we go upside down, the blood pressure on our brain increases, and if we stay down too long, we run the risk of a stroke. Dogs don't have it, cats don't. This becomes important in space travel because you get in the weightlessness of space, and your heart starts pumping against that head. Well, we don't know how long we can survive without developing massive strokes. But in the case of giraffe, he has a regulator that controls his blood pressure. No other animal has it. Again, the gap between him and the other animals. But something else, the biggest gap is a gap between living and non-living. To go from non-living to living, suppose you just take one cell, the cell that has billions of atoms with a B. Every atom has to come together in the right place, and the processes have to start immediately. Now, what do I mean with processes? It has to be able to grow, to reproduce, to respirate, to ingest food, to excrete waste, and basically to hold itself together. If it doesn't, it decomposes. So what if some parts were missing? They would decompose. The whole thing has to come together like in no time, and the processes have to start right away in no time, where the thing decomposes. I spent 27 years at Lockheed, and we never put an automobile transmission in an airplane. It would have been utterly worthless. You have to put each part together in the right location. And by the way, they did not put airplanes together by getting a pile of junk and blowing it up with like Big Bang and having to play all the parts just come and fall together, fall in place in perfect working order with a nice, bright, painted finish. You'll make my point. All right, folks, so much for evolution, unless somebody wants to discuss it any farther. I had students want to raise their hand. How many of you taught evolution? A lot of professors today are afraid to teach it. 50 years ago, they weren't. 50 years ago, it was a proven fact. And all the proofs have been disproven. And most professors of evolution know it, and are afraid of being shown. Hey, you think I'm afraid of being shown up? I am. I've been shown up in front of my classes before, but they're afraid of being shown up. All right. Anyway, but we got to go on. This is what they're teaching now. That man started out primitive. He first developed primitive stone tools. Then his stone tool ability got better. I hope to reverse that before the class is over. That he eventually got to where he lived in caves. Now I want to say something about the cavemen. We have cavemen and women living in this world today. And some of them have laptop computers, and some of them have cellular telephones, and some of them have iPads, and they live in caves. We have right here in Atlanta people who live under bridges, who own cell phones. Some of them go to work regularly or hold down jobs. That's how they can afford to pay for cell phone service. When you see a person who's living under a bridge, but who has a cell phone, you can tell he's living on the fringes of a more advanced society. All right, we have in France caves that have high quality oil paintings that have lasted thousands of years. What does it show me? It showed me that these paintings were made by cave people who lived on the fringe of a more advanced society that could produce high quality oil paintings. All right, Neanderthal, looked on as being primitive. He actually was bigger than the average modern human, and he had a larger brain capacity than a modern human. It is now known he interbred with modern humans, and that all of us are carrying some Neanderthal DNA in our DNA right now. Suppose we got enough of the right people together who had this much DNA and that DNA, and if we kept on reproducing, we could reproduce, we could recreate the Neanderthal man. Cro-Magnon man, I myself am descended from the Cro-Magnon man. The difference between him and modern man is he was bigger than modern man, averaged more than 6 feet tall. Oh, we have a lot of people today who are 6 feet, but the average height of the average man today is not as big as the average Cro-Magnon man. Had a fairly seemingly muscular frame and had a larger brain capacity, noticeably larger, than modern man. And I have a 1967 zoology book that I took from my house. I'll tell you, I'm 69 years old. I went to college first in 1967, and my teacher was an evolutionist. But that zoology book even asked the question, is it possible that modern man is degenerate? The fossil record shows that practically everything living today is degenerate. Right here in Georgia, we used to have sloths that were as big as elephants. The buffalo used to be bigger than a modern elephant. Have any of you ever heard any of this? I mean, yeah, okay, a few of you. Yeah, we have found snake fossils 100 feet long. Tree fossils 300 and 400 feet. Now we do have some sequoia trees that grow that tall still, but the point I'm making is life appears to have gone downhill. Evolution calls for life going uphill, when actually evidence seems to show the opposite. Something else that the fossil record shows. Well, I'll tell you this. There was an evolutionist about to debate a creationist one time, and the evolutionist was being advised by an older evolutionist, and he was saying to the younger one that was about to debate, now whatever you do, don't bring up the fossil record. If you do, he'll get you every time. The fossil record, among other things, shows that you have a layer down here of what's called virgin soil. Boom. The next layer up has all the phyla of plants and animals fully grown and fully developed. Perfectly formed, perfectly developed, every one of them with no evidence of having had a beginning and no evidence of anything that could be called a transitional form between one or the other. It's called the Cambrian layer, by the way. All right, I'm gonna leave evolution for right now. But again, the point I want to make is I think that these men were more advanced than we are, and I'm about to show you why. All right. The first people we know about were the Sumerians. Now keep in mind what I said about primary sources. The Sumerians supposedly had the beginning of civilization. They picked the most unlikely spot on earth to start a civilization. Nothing there but clay and reeds. Clay in abundance. They made their homes of clay, but it was there. Then, here's the good news of it. They wrote on clay tablets. What's so great about that? Their clay tablets have survived thousands, not hundreds, thousands of years to the present time. So when we read a Sumerian clay tablet, we are reading a source as original as it gets, folk. Now when we read Aristotle, we're reading a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and who knows how much it changed in the copy. This is even true when we read the Bible. We don't have an original. We read a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. When you read the Sumerian clay tablets, you're reading the originals, folk. Not a copy of a copy. You're reading them as they wrote it. And it shows one thing. Their mind was different from ours in many important ways, which I'm about to get into again. Prepare for a ride. They wrote on clay tablets. How did they develop a civilization with nothing but clay and very little? Well, somehow they managed. They invented, well, they had discovered the wheel. They set up schools. They organized into armies. Basically, they became what we call civilized. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are wondering, Sumer was located right here in southern Mesopotamia, or what is today southern Iraq, near where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers come together. All right, now by civilized, when I was a kid and a teacher asked me what the word civilized means, I said, oh, it means the ability to write. The Sumerians may have invented writing. That's part of it. Writing, but it's much more, basically the word civilized means you have diversity of occupation. In other words, you have the blacksmith, the farmer, the teacher, the metal worker, all working together. The blacksmith makes more metal than he needs, so he trades with the farmer for food. The farmer grows a little bit more food than he needs, so he trades with the blacksmith for metal, for a plow. Trade. Now your book's going to talk a lot about trade. Now you might not realize how important trade is. There is no one place on earth that has all the material needed to make hardly anything. So how do you get the material needed to make something? You trade. To make an airplane, you have to buy something from here, something from over there, something from here, and something from there, all over the place. Put it together. There's no one place on earth where they say, we have everything right here in our backyard that we need to put an automobile together. Or you don't. You have to trade. Very important. But trade is a big part of being civilized. Another part of being civilized, you have government. If you have a dispute with your neighbor, instead of getting out your sword and fighting it out, you go to the courts and let the judges decide. Now, I want to say this. I try my best to stay away from the judges as much as possible. You might feel like they're treating you unfairly, and everybody who's dealt with them sooner or later does. But they do maintain some level of civilization that otherwise would not be. Without them, there's nothing but chaos. All right, civilized people try to settle the disputes in civil law. And of course, basically, again, civilization, diversity of occupation, working together in harmony with, you have to have government, armies, laws, religion. Most civilizations have had that. But that's the basic different definition of civilization. Sumer had the first civilization. They are known to have tamed the dog, tamed the cat, tamed the horse, the sheep, the goat, the pig, oats, barley, rye, all kinds of grains. They learned how to grow